My name is Malik Grant, and for 11 years I believed in a story written for two. Corinne and I met when I was 25, fresh out of the Air Force, trying to carve out a new life one high-voltage install at a time. She was studying art history, bright-eyed and fearless, like she could will entire museums into existence with the right combination of passion and paint. I fell for her laugh first, clear and unguarded, and for the way her eyes lit up whenever she spoke of something she loved. When our daughter Isla arrived 14 years later, the joke quickly became that our household ran on three things: electricity, art, and teenage attitude, and somehow we balanced it all. At least, I thought we did, until the morning Shane called. I was 15 minutes into troubleshooting a blown transformer at the Westfield Industrial Complex when my phone buzzed in my back pocket. I glanced down Shane. We'd served on the same block watch after I moved into the neighborhood. He never called at sunrise unless something was wrong. "You need to get home," he said without preamble. His voice was tight, clipped, the kind of tone you adopt when you know you're about to deliver bad news. "There's a moving truck at your place," he said, a beat later. "And your wife supervising." My chest went cold before my fists clenched. A moving truck. My Corinne, clipboard in hand, directing some stranger's furniture onto a U-Haul as if it belonged to him. Every instinct in me screamed impossibility, but I shoved the wrench into my tool belt, yanked off my gloves, and sprinted for my pickup. The roar of that engine was the soundtrack of my anxiety as I tore down the highway, tires skimming over tar lines. Thoughts collided in my mind. Did she leave me? Does she know? Should I call Isla? But I kept driving, desperate to arrive with my own eyes before my imagination conjured something worse. Down our street, the tidy curb that once held my truck was occupied by a white box truck sliding its back doors open. I killed the engine and slung myself out, heart pounding like a jackhammer. I saw her standing on the driveway, clipboard pressed to her chest, lips pursed in a patient frown, while a man barked orders in a voice I didn't recognize. Box after box, frame after frame, table leg after table leg, they loaded our life into that cavernous cargo hold. My vision tunneled onto her. Corinne, the woman who had sworn forever, laughing politely at that man's quips. When his gaze flicked toward me, he stopped mid-sentence. I could see the shock flare in his eyes, like he wasn't sure whether to keep loading or to brace himself. I reached them before I realized I'd crossed the lawn. My hand shot out before my mind could catch up. My fist connected with his jaw in a single, savage arc, a fist guided by 11 years of disbelief and betrayal. He staggered back, eyes rolling, and for a heartbeat everything froze, the boxes, the truck, even Corinne's clipboard suspended in midair. Then he tumbled against a stack of packing crates, and they crashed down like dominoes. He hit the pavement with a muffled grunt. Corinne gasped, and for the first time I saw fear flicker behind her composure. "Malik," she said, voice trembling. "Stop." But my world had fractured, the seams of our story ripped open. I had no words. I had no questions. All I had was adrenaline and heartbreak coursing through my veins. I stood over that man, Lucas Cross. I'd later learn, as though my mere presence would shatter him further. I remember his name because it was the first truth that tumbled out when the dust settled. Lucas Cross, Corinne's college boyfriend, the one who got away. Apparently he was home again, commandeering the set of the life I'd built. I helped Lucas to his feet, half in shock that he was real and half wanting to hit him again for every second he'd ever walked with my wife. Corinne stepped forward, brushing invisible dust from her blouse, her fingers trembling around that clipboard as if it were a lifeline. The moving crew looked awkward, uncertain whether to keep working or to run. "This is Lucas," she announced, voice stiff but louder than I expected. "He's my boyfriend." The words hit me like a concussion. Boyfriend. Not guest. Not friend. Boyfriend. She introduced him to me as if we were strangers at best and enemies at worst. My pulse thundered. 11 years of marriage, 14 years of fatherhood, mortgages, anniversaries, family dinners, late-night talks, reduced to a bystander in my own life. My chest ached with the irony. I had torn my shirt on open panels to keep this house lit. I had cradled her through fevers, sleepless nights, deadlines. I had held Isla's hand at her first school recital, teaching her that family was a circle you never broke. And here she was, shrugging me off. I wanted to scream, to plead, to do anything to salvage the white picket fence narrative we'd sold ourselves. But the jagged truth was undeniable. I wasn't her husband anymore. I was a speed bump in her fairy tale. The police arrived just as the morning sun climbed higher, blue lights flashing on the asphalt. I didn't resist. I let the officers handcuff me, the cold steel a reminder that I still had choices, even now. I watched Corinne speak to them, her eyebrows arched in a practiced look of victimhood. "He attacked my friend," she said. "I only called him because I knew he'd lose it." My head spun. Friend. That was her word. In her universe, I had lapsed from husband to stranger, from ally to threat. The same hands that once held mine in comfort now hung limp at my sides. As they led me away, I glanced back at our home, our life, boxes disappearing into Lucas's truck like memories loading into an exile bound for parts unknown. I tasted bile and regret. But beneath it all was a spark of resolve. I would not be erased. I would not accept this cheap rewrite of my story. They could dismantle my house. They could cast me out of my marriage. But they could never strip me of the man I was, the father I had been, the husband I had tried to be. I vowed then that this crack in the fairy tale would become a fault line they regretted. I would rise from this rubble and build something stronger. Because fairy tales crack, but they don't have to end in ruin. And this was only the prologue to what came next. Lucas Cross stood in my driveway like a conqueror surveying a prize that wasn't his. I recognized him instantly from the faded photograph Corinne kept tucked behind her bedside lamp, a smile that once belonged solely to me. 11 years ago, he'd been the boy she doodled in the margins of her notebooks, the voice in her head when I was away on assignments. Now he wore its place on his chest like armor, guiding movers as they loaded my dining table, my study desk, our daughter's dresser. The morning air felt thin, charged with the electricity of betrayal, and I wondered how a single person could warp a life so completely. "Nice to see you again, Malik." His tone was casual, almost friendly, but I detected steel beneath the civility. He offered a half bow, the kind of gesture you reserve for someone you respect, or someone you think you've bested. My hand hovered at my side, the remnants of the punch I'd thrown still tingling in my knuckles. He was supposed to be a memory, a footnote in our shared history, not the man in my driveway supervising the dismantling of my home. Corinne stepped forward, clipboard pressed to her hip like a badge of authority. "Malik, this is Lucas," she said, eyes locked on mine. "He's my boyfriend." The words hit me like a freight train. Boyfriend. The word echoed off the walls of my mind, bouncing back with the force of a betrayal I was still struggling to comprehend. She spoke his name with an intimacy I'd never heard in her voice, as if she were introducing a long-cherished secret to the world. I watched her through slitted lids, half expecting her to blink, to correct herself, to realize the cruelty of those syllables. But she didn't. She only smiled politely at Lucas, then turned away and tapped her pen against the clipboard, signaling the crew to continue. I swallowed hard, willing my pulse to steady. I had built this life from the ground up, the house, the bills, the promises, the daughter who stared wide-eyed at everything she encountered. I had believed in our story. The late-night talks, the road trips, the cradle songs, and scraped-knee consolations. And here they were, being packed into cardboard boxes by strangers with blank faces. I felt an impulse to wrench everything back, to scoop up our lives and carry them somewhere no one could touch. Instead, I found myself stepping forward, boots crunching on gravel, until I was within arm's reach of Lucas. His eyes met mine, unwavering. He was the same height, maybe a hair taller. He had the same easy grin and the same careless confidence I'd once despised in him. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, voice rough, the question a rasping breath. "Why here? Why now?" Lucas shifted his weight, but didn't break eye contact. "We tried the quiet approach," he said. "You know how stubborn she can be. Some chapters need a dramatic rewrite." My scalp prickled. The arrogance of it, choosing our family's fate with the flourish of a novelist twisting a plot, was more infuriating than his presence. "This isn't a storybook," I said. "You can't just turn the page on people's lives." He chuckled, a low sound that grated against me. "Apparently you can. Corinne's happy. Islaw's happier." He glanced back at the movers, who were sliding our coffee table onto the ramp. "She made a choice." Corinne's gaze flickered to me, then to Lucas. I saw regret in the corner of her eyes, but it was buried under something colder, certainty, perhaps. "You've already made yours," she said. Her voice was firm now, unyielding. "There's no going back." I felt my knees quake beneath me. Loss clawed at my chest like a wild animal. "You're selling our home," I said, voice breaking. "You're taking our daughter's room, our family portraits. She held up her hand. Our divorce is nearly final, Malik. You'll have your share. Her words were like a scalpel, precise and painless only until you realize the damage is done. Isla appeared in the doorway then, her backpack slung unevenly over one shoulder, hair mussed from the day's classes. She froze when she saw me standing in the driveway, and I saw confusion and fear cross her face. Corinne turned to her. Isla, sweetheart, come meet Lucas. My stomach nodded. She shuffled forward, eyes downcast, but glanced up at me, searching. I opened my mouth, but the word stuck. I raised a hand in a silent gesture. I'm here. I love you. But I knew it wasn't enough to hold a teenager's world together when her mother's version of happily ever after was crashing around us. Lucas knelt to meet Isla's height. Hey, Isla, he said, voice gentle. I'm Lucas. Your mom told me so much about you. She nodded, eyes wide. Hi. Her voice was small, but polite. She folded her arms, the way kids do when they're unsure what to feel. And there it was, the moment that solidified everything. She looked between us and, without hesitation, stepped toward Lucas, as though choosing a new protagonist for her life story. My heart thundered. Daughter. Lifetime. That bond had always felt unbreakable, but in that instant I saw its fault lines. She wasn't afraid of me. She was merely accepting what her mother had sold as the next chapter. I swallowed the sting and stood taller. Isla, I said softly, you don't have to stay out here if you're hungry or cold. We can go get hot chocolate, just like we talked about. She hesitated, eyes flicking back to Corinne. Her mother's lips curved into a knowing smile. My chest tightened. Go on, Corinne said, voice almost too sweet. Have fun. Isla glanced at me and then at Lucas. My throat went dry. I closed the distance between us and knelt in front of her. I'm not your enemy, kiddo, I said. I'm your dad. I'm always here for you, no matter what. Tears welled in her eyes. She looked at me, saw something in my face, pain, love, determination. Then she turned away, walked past Lucas, and slipped her hand into mine. The warmth of her small palm against mine felt like an anchor in a storm. Lucas stood and watched, expression unreadable. Corinne's face softened for a moment, a flicker of regret crossing her features before she shut it down. I squeezed Isla's hand gently. Her grip tightened in response. Let's go, I whispered. She nodded, and together we walked away from the truck, from the boxes, from the life we once shared. The movers stopped for a beat, then resumed loading, indifferent to the silent revolt that had just taken place. Corinne watched us go, lips pressed thin, as though she was erasing our chapter with her glare. As we reached the end of the driveway, I glanced back. Lucas met my gaze for an instant, then looked away. I felt something settle in my chest. A fierce resolve mixed with the ache of betrayal. I would fight for every corner of our story worth saving. That afternoon, as Isla and I disappeared around the corner, I realized our fairy tale had shattered. But in its fragments lay the possibility of something stronger, something real. And I would do whatever it took to rewrite the narrative on my own terms, one honest word at a time. When Isla walked through the front door that afternoon, her backpack sliding off one shoulder, I felt the air shift between us. In that moment she was both the child I'd raised and a stranger swept into someone else's story. I closed the door softly behind her and turned, forcing my voice to steadiness. Hey, kiddo. How was school? She gave me a small nod. I was tracing the new layout of my apartment. Bare walls, a lone armchair, a half-assembled bookshelf waiting for our weekend project. She dropped her bag by the couch and shrugged out of her jacket, folding it neatly. Routine, I thought. Maybe routine could be our lifeline. I gestured toward the kitchen. I'm making grilled cheese and tomato soup. Your favorite. The words felt hollow when I said them, like a script I'd rehearsed 1,000 times in my head. But she didn't reply, only walked past me to the refrigerator, popped it open, and studied the shelves as though searching for evidence of my sincerity. I waited, heart thudding. After a moment, she reached past a carton of eggs and pulled out a bottle of water. Still no words. She held it between her slender fingers and looked up at me. Dad, we need to talk, she said, voice low, steady. Not the note of surprise or fear I'd expected, but a calm certainty that chilled me. I nodded and led her to the living room. She perched on the edge of the armchair, hands clasped around that water bottle, as I sat on the couch opposite her. Our positions felt formal, like guests at a mediation rather than father and daughter. I swallowed. Okay. She took a breath, eyes fixed on the floor. For a second, I thought she might turn away, but then she lifted her gaze to meet mine. Is it true? She asked. Her voice trembled almost imperceptibly, but the question was clear. Mom's moving out. She's with Lucas. My chest tightened. How do you explain to a 14-year-old that the foundation you believed in has been torn out from under you? I thought of sugarcoating it, telling her adults sometimes grow apart, that she wasn't to blame, that everything would be all right. But Isla deserved the truth. I leaned forward. Your mom and I were separated. She told me she loves Lucas now. She blinked, expression unreadable. He's your friend's college boyfriend? She said, voice brittle. That guy. I nodded. The harshness of her tone woke something in me. She grabbed a cushion and hugged it to her chest. You're kidding, she whispered. Tears gathered in the corners of her eyes. You're messing with me. I reached out and touched her arm, gentle. I wouldn't joke about this, sweetheart. The label felt too small, but I forced it. I know it's confusing. I know you love her. Her gaze drifted to the window, where afternoon light fractured into patterns on the hardwood floor. She let the bottle clatter onto the wooden surface and folded her arms across her chest. I don't love her, she said, voice louder now. She loves Lucas. I don't even know who I'm supposed to stay mad at, her? You? Him. She shook her head, hair brushing her cheeks. It's like she flipped a switch, and suddenly our life is a case study in bad decisions. Anger flared in me. Anger at Corinne for playing with our daughter's world, anger at Lucas for barging in like he owned us, and anger at myself for not seeing it sooner. I bit my lip. I'm sorry, Isla, I said. I wish I could have stopped it. Her head snapped back to me, eyes flashing. Why didn't you? She demanded. You're supposed to be my dad. You're supposed to protect me. Those words cut through my heart. I tried, I whispered. I came home. I stopped. Fighting in the driveway, the police, the courtroom, none of it mattered if I still hadn't reached her. I should have believed you sooner, I confessed. I should have talked to Mom before I let things get this far. Her chest heaved. She stood up abruptly, pacing the small living room. You're both idiots, she snapped, and I winced at the cruelty, but underneath it I heard her pain. She thinks she's found her soulmate, and you think you can punch your problems away. Neither of you cares what this does to me. She sank back into the chair, burying her face in her hands. I miss my mom. I miss my dad. I miss our stupid normal life. I rose and knelt beside her, wrapping my arms around her trembling shoulders. She fit into my embrace like a missing piece, and I held her tight. I know. I said into her hair, voice thick. Me too. But I'm here now. I'm staying. She looked up, tears streaming, and I brushed them away with my thumb. I don't want to be your prize, she whispered. I don't want to choose. My heart ached at her words. She shouldn't have to choose between her parents. You won't, I promised. You never will. You're not the prize. You're our daughter, and I'll fight so you can just be a kid again, without having to pick sides. She stared at me, searching my eyes for a promise she could trust. I nodded slowly. That means dinners together, weekend movies, whatever you need to feel safe. I'll make it happen. She blinked, as though startled by the sincerity in my voice. Even if I mess up? She asked, voice small. I grinned, careful not to let the tears slip. Especially then. The tension in her shoulders eased, and she leaned into me. For a long moment we held each other, two souls rocked by the same storm, seeking solid ground in the ruins of a fairy tale. She pulled back and wiped her cheeks. Thanks, she said quietly. Really? I gathered her into another hug. Always, I told her. Always. That night, as I tucked her into her old bed at her grandparents' house, I realized how fragile trust can be, and how fiercely it can be rebuilt when you show up for someone, again and again. Isla fell asleep, clutching my hand, breathing soft and even. I watched her face in the dim light and vowed to protect that peace. Fairy tales crack, but with love and honesty, you can heal what they break and build something real in its place. I closed the door behind me and let the click of the lock echo through the empty hallway. The echoes of my own footsteps felt alien in the place I had once called home. Every tile, every paint fleck, every half-glimpsed corridor held memories I was determined to erase. This wasn't about running away. It was about taking control. I had built my life on precision and planning, first as an airman, then as an electrical contractor, threading circuits through massive industrial frames. Now I had one final installation to execute, my exit. My phone buzzed with a single message from Julius Mercado, my lawyer, all set. Accounts frozen. Documents drafted. Call when you're ready. No emojis, no niceties, just execution. I stared at the screen, the glow reflecting off my sweat-creased forehead. I pictured Julius in his sleek downtown office, tie loosened, spectacles perched on the bridge of his nose, hunched over piles of corporate filings like a shark circling prey. He was brilliant, ruthless, and exactly the kind of ally I needed. I hit call and leaned against the door for support. Malik, Julius said, his voice calm behind a wall of legal steel. Everything is in motion. Curran's access revoked. Joint accounts closed. Beneficiaries updated. You even left her $42 in the joint checking, just enough to cover groceries for a day. I managed a humorless chuckle. I calculated her contribution this year. We agreed it was fair. He paused, then laughed quietly. Fair and disciplined. Just like you. I felt a surge of gratitude for this man who navigated the gray seas of family law like a submarine captain. Now comes the tricky part, he continued. Removing her from policies, memberships, insurances. That all finishes tomorrow morning. By midday, she'll be off every listing tied to your name. I closed my eyes, inhaled. The weight of what I was doing pressed on my chest. But beneath it lay relief. Every frozen account, every revoked authorization was a brick in the foundation of my new life. What about the house? I asked softly. Once divorce is final, everything transfers. She'll get a notice. He replied, You've covered that too. Title transfer will be effective upon decree. She'll have 60 days to vacate. We scheduled the hearing next week. My pulse quickened at the word hearing. A courtroom often felt like a theater, but here it was our final act of separation. I straightened, squared my shoulders. Thank you, Julius. He answered, happy to help. You're doing the right thing. Then he hung up. I lowered the phone and surveyed the apartment. The sterile calm of a place emptied of love, but not of potential. The fluorescent overhead lights hummed as though signaling a fresh start. I moved like a man possessed, gathering scattered documents from the kitchen counter. Bills, statements, policy papers, each section I clipped with ruthless efficiency. My pins clicked through signing envelopes addressed to banks, insurance agencies, utilities. I made sure Corinne's name no longer opened doors or activated switches. I detached her from every standing order, every monthly draft. I took pride in the symmetry of it all. She contributed $42. I repealed 42 authorizations. Balanced accounts made me feel sane again. At noon, I called the bank's fraud hotline, speaking in precise terms. I need to freeze all accounts joined at the following numbers. I am a victim of fraud. Please send written confirmation. The bank rep's voice hesitated behind protocol, then she clicked through prompts. I imagined her eyebrows knitting at my case, but on her end of the line, I heard compliance. Less than an hour later, I had emails confirming arrest of access, a digital paper trail that made me feel impervious. Next, I tackled the utilities. I called the water company, the power company, the cable provider, the internet service, each call taking only minutes because I had every account number laid out. The representatives asked for authorization codes, social security snippets, dates of birth. I answered without emotion, reciting facts like a machine. My professional demeanor disarmed them. They presumed goodwill. Over the phone, I revoked Corinne's name as a user, changed passwords, updated contact information. By the time I reached the gas company, I recognized the pattern. I was erasing her existence with surgical calm. Then I logged on to our joint streaming accounts, music, movies, apps, and removed her email address. I unsubscribed her from meal kit deliveries, fitness apps, cloud storage, anything that pinged her phone or mall account. I deleted 29 subscriptions in 20 minutes. My finger hovered over a final entry, a yoga class membership she'd gifted herself 3 months ago. I paused, hand trembling, but I tapped cancel subscription, because she'd canceled us first. By mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed with 2 texts. One from my bank confirming closure of joint accounts, and another from the insurance agent confirming that only I remained on the policies. I read them, and for the first time that day felt my chest unclench. It was as though every legal safeguard was a rung on a ladder lifting me out of a pit I never asked to dig. I sat at the edge of the couch and ran my hands through my hair. My mind flashed back to the day I first met Corinne. Chipped coffee mug in hand, paint-smeared jeans, eyes bright with possibility. We were young, daring, and certain we'd conquer the world together. I wondered if she remembered those mornings, those whispered promises, those dreams that felt within reach. Perhaps she did, and perhaps that's why this had cut so deep. But I reminded myself that nostalgia was a luxury I couldn't afford. This was reality, and reality required action. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small notebook. Lined, sturdy, untouched since before the separation. I flipped it open to a blank page, uncapped a pen, and wrote, Project Exit, Day 1. Below it I jotted bullet points. Freeze joint accounts. Revoke beneficiaries. Remove from policies. Title transfer. Hearing, June 24th, 10 a.m. Support. Isla, Housing, Therapy. New apartment budget. Emergency fund, $20,000. I realized with satisfaction I no longer needed to brainstorm. This was execution. The final act of my disappearing involved one more call. I dialed Carla, my mother-in-law. Her voice came with that familiar tremor of guilt. Malik, she said. Corinne told me you've cut her off. I let silence fill the line before speaking. I've done what's necessary to protect my assets and my daughter's stability. Her breath hitched. Isla's safe. Your call is triggering two things, I said. 1. Confirmation I'm doing the right thing. 2. Confirmation I need space to focus on my daughter. Carla's sobs echoed. I understand. I'm sorry. I exhaled and ended the call. No more family entanglements. No more windows for Corinne to slip back through. I closed the notebook and set it on the coffee table, aligning it perfectly with the edge. In its blank pages lay the blueprint for the next chapter, and unlike the last one, this I would write alone and honestly. As evening settled, I walked through each room, visualizing how we would move forward, a second-hand couch for Isla's laughter, walls adorned with her art instead of mine, a bookshelf piled with her favorite novels. I imagined cooking dinner together, talking about algebra homework and middle school crushes. Tonight's grilled cheese and tomato soup would be the first real meal in this new phase, untainted by divorce courts or betrayal. I unlocked my phone and called Julius one last time for the day. Everything looks good, he said after I rattled off updates. It's some rest. You've earned it. I thanked him, then ended the call. I sat down, pulled my legs onto the couch, and allowed the quiet to greet me. No boxes, no moving crews, no clipboard-clad betrayals, just the hum of a refrigerator and the promise of tomorrow. In that silence, I felt a fragile peace take root. I had disappeared from the life Corinne and Lucas tried to write for me, and in that disappearance lay my greatest control. I would reemerge as the man Isla needed, the man I believed myself to be all along. My chapter of vanishing was complete. Now came the part about coming back. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I stepped into the courtroom, my suit crisp and my tie straightened, symbols of the order I craved amid chaos. The bench rose ahead, a solemn wooden edifice that separated me from Corinne and her lawyer, but also from a life that had felt increasingly surreal. I carried a slim binder of documents, financial statements, property titles, custody agreements, as though by holding them I could wrest back the narrative they'd tried to steal. Each step toward the front of the room echoed against polished floors, the sound merging with the soft rustle of papers and the low murmur of attorneys preparing their cases. I swallowed and took my seat, determined to maintain calm. Across the aisle, Corinne sat with her back ramrod straight, face composed in a practiced mask. Lucas was conspicuously absent. I learned afterward he'd been excused by her lawyer on grounds of irrelevance. Good. The fewer reminders of his intrusion, the better. I met Corinne's eyes for a moment, cool, distant, as though she were observing someone performing a role she no longer felt part of. My throat tightened, but I held her gaze and offered the barest flicker of acknowledgement. This was real. The judge entered, robe swishing, and the room fell silent. He nodded at the clerk, who read the case caption, Grant versus Grant, et al. My heart lurched at hearing my name paired with Corinne's in a legal duel. The phrase et al. Felt ominous. Others included, others invested in the dissolution of our family. When the judge looked down at us, I recognized his kindly eyes beneath silvered hair, a man accustomed to weighing equities and emotional wreckage. He began with formalities, identification of counsel, confirmation of notice, and a brief outline of what lay ahead. My attorney, Julius Mercado, rose and spoke with quiet authority, laying out the essential facts. Our marriage of 11 years, the date of separation, the division of assets, and the issue of custody. He presented a concise summary that made my spine straighten. This was how control felt: methodical, logical, immune to emotional quagmires. He offered the judge an exhibit binder containing property deeds showing I had purchased the house before marriage, retirement account statements illustrating equal contributions, and bank records tracking Corinne's minimal deposits into joint accounts. Each page turned in the judge's hand felt like a nail driven into the assertion that I had been the sole maintainer of this life. When Julius finished, Corinne's lawyer, a prim woman with sharp spectacles and sharper arguments, rose to counter. She spoke of equitable distribution, conjuring phrases like marital asset and community property. She argued that Corinne's efforts as a homemaker and mother had contributed intangible value, a claim I could not dispute. Those intangible things had indeed held our home together. But Julius had anticipated it. He acknowledged her role, but reminded the court that non-monetary contributions did not automatically translate into spousal support when incomes were nearly equal and no abuse or neglect could be shown. He closed by stating that Corinne had waived claims to spousal support in initial filings and expressed willingness to forego any claim to the house in exchange for a lump sum settlement, leaving her free to rebuild without ongoing entanglement. I felt my pulse slow as the judge nodded, absorbing the arguments. He flipped through the documents, occasionally murmuring or I see. When he asked Corinne directly if she wished to maintain any claim to the property or to spousal support, her face tightened. I saw her swallow, lips pressed in a thin line, and she answered in a small voice, "No, Your Honor. I only want what's fair under the law." That phrase, "what's fair under the law," echoed in my mind. Fair? I wondered if she truly understood fairness, or if she sought only neutrality to avoid appearing vindictive. Then came the question of custody. We had agreed, outside court, that Isla would live primarily with me. Corinne's lawyer reminded the judge that a 14-year-old's preference could carry weight. Julius countered by producing a statement from Isla's therapist, attesting to the child's anxiety over being forced to choose homes and the emotional distress she'd endured at witnessing the moving truck episode. I watched as the judge studied the therapist's letter, word by word, nodding. He asked if either parent objected to joint legal custody, but sole physical custody for me. Corinne's lawyer looked to her client. Corinne spoke up, her voice wavering for the first time in the proceeding, and said she would agree, provided she could have reasonable visitation and decision-making input on medical and educational matters. I felt a tug in my chest. That was more than fair. The court recessed for a brief lunch, and I found myself in a small corridor outside the courtroom, hands clasped behind my back. Corinne emerged, flanked by her lawyer, and our eyes met again. This time, I saw vulnerability beneath her defiance, uncertainty, perhaps sorrow. I caught my reflection in a polished brass plaque, the man who had fought his way back from betrayal, whose life lay in legal documents and therapist statements. I wondered if this was who I had become. A corporate version of myself, using contracts and custody agreements to hold together a heart in pieces. When we returned, the judge delivered his ruling. He decreed that the house title would transfer to me in 60 days, with no spousal interest, and ordered that Corinne vacate the premises by that deadline. He further granted me sole physical custody of Isla, with Corinne entitled to alternate weekends, one evening per week, and shared legal decision-making. He approved the lump sum payment to Corinne, reflecting her contributions, and dismissed any claim to spousal support. His tone was measured, almost sympathetic, acknowledging that divorce was often the least desirable remedy, but the one most consistent with law and fairness. Relief washed over me, hot and intense. I felt the tension drain from my shoulders. Corinne closed her eyes and exhaled audibly, as though she and I had both been holding our breath through the worst scene of our lives. The judge asked if there were any further matters. Julius indicated no, and the clerk pronounced the orders final. It was done. As court broke and people shuffled out, I rose slowly and approached Corinne. There were words on my lips, an apology, perhaps, or thanks for the civility, but the silence between us felt too raw for words. She looked at me, eyes red-rimmed, and I nodded curtly. "Take care of yourself," I said quietly. She nodded once, turned, and walked away, her heels clicking against marble. I watched her go, a part of me wanting to call her back, to bridge the chasm that the law had only formalized, not healed. Outside the courthouse, the air felt sharp with June heat. I stepped into the sun, closed my eyes, and let its warmth settle on my face. I thought of Isla, of the stability I would now provide, of the dinners we would share in her new room, the homework sessions, the movie nights. I thought of my empty home, waiting to be refilled with laughter rather than litigation. Julius clapped me on the shoulder, breaking my reverie. "You did good today," he said. "You held your ground without losing your humanity." I managed a small smile. He handed me a copy of the final decree. "Keep this safe," he said. "It's the foundation of your fresh start." I tucked the decree into my jacket and exhaled. The courtroom had been cold, sterile, detached, necessary, but outside, life awaited. There would be packing after the 60 days, moving, setting up a new kitchen table, distributing child support payments. There would be custody exchanges at grandparents' homes, sleepovers, adjustments. There would be long evenings when Isla and I talked about hopes and fears, patching the cracks the fairy tale had left behind. I looked up at the sky, a pale blue canvas beneath the sun's glare, and felt a quiet pride. I had stepped into the courtroom as a man on the defensive and emerged as a man with agency. The judge's words had sealed our fate, but they had also lifted a weight off my chest. Corinne had her freedom, and I had mine. And Isla had both parents, albeit in new roles. As I walked away, the courthouse receding behind me, I realized that the coldest rooms could lead to the warmest new beginnings. The fairy tale may have cracked, but from its shards I could forge a life of honesty and respect. And that, I vowed, was a story worth building. 2 weeks passed in a daze of work and paperwork, but nothing felt as urgent as the phone call I received on a damp Tuesday morning. I was halfway through calibrating a transformer when my phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Carla, Corinne's mother, brimming with panic. "Isla isn't eating. Grades slipping. Can you call me?" My heart lurched, and I wiped grease from my hands on my jeans before scrambling to find a quiet corner. Carla's number flashed again. "She's barely speaking. Keeps asking when you'll come back. She's so fragile." I dropped my tools and sprinted to the side office. My foreman raised an eyebrow as I burst in, breathing hard. "Everything okay?" he asked. I swallowed, forcing steadiness into my voice. "Family emergency. I need to go." He nodded and covered for me with a curt, "Family comes first." 2 minutes later, I was in my truck, tires squealing as I sped through the industrial park, mind looping Carla's words. My daughter, my child, was unraveling, and I hadn't been there to catch her. By the time I reached Roy and Carla's house, my chest felt like a drumbeat of guilt. Carla met me at the door, eyes red-rimmed, hair loose around her shoulders. She hugged me fiercely. "Thank God," she whispered. "She's in her room." I followed her through the living room, over toys scattered by the TV stand, and up a narrow staircase to Isla's sanctuary. The door stood ajar, soft lamplight spilling onto a pile of unmade blankets. Inside, she sat curled on her pink and gray quilt, knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped tight. Her hair was mussed, and her school uniform hung limp on her small frame. She looked like she'd shrunk in the past fortnight. "I'm here," I said softly, closing the door behind me. Her head snapped up, eyes bright with unshed tears. She tried to smile, but it trembled away. "Hi, Dad," she whispered. The words felt too big for such a tiny voice. I knelt at the foot of her bed, resting my hands on my knees. "You okay?" I asked, tone gentle. She looked away, biting her lip. I noticed the half-eaten sandwich on her nightstand, cold and untouched. The light of understanding hit me. She couldn't eat because her heart was broken. She shifted on the mattress, hugging her knees. "Mom told me if I ever said anything, she'd send me away. To boarding school." Her voice hitched. She said she didn't need me in her new life. The words struck me like frozen shards. I felt my palms go clammy. "Sweetheart," I began, voice unsteady. She was scared. She made a bad choice. She flinched at my words, pulling the quilt tighter. "You get scared, too, sometimes," I continued. "But you talk to me. You don't build walls that keep people out." Her eyes glistened. I thought if I stayed quiet, she'd like her new life without me. She exhaled shakily. "I just wanted her to be happy." My chest ached at her vulnerability. I scooted closer, letting my legs dangle off the edge of the bed. Without thinking, I swept her hair aside and brushed her cheek with my thumb. "You are my world, Isla. Your happiness isn't about who she chooses to love. It's about you having the freedom to be yourself." Her tears spilled free, and she rested her head on my shoulder, pressing all the hurt of the last month into my spine. I held her, rocking slightly, humming our bedtime tune from years ago. In that melody lay every promise I'd ever made: protect, provide, love unconditionally. When her sobs slowed, I gently lifted her chin to look into her eyes. "I'm so sorry you felt forgotten," I said. "I'll never let that happen again. I promise you, I won't leave." She blinked at me, searching my face like she was verifying my heart. Then she smiled, a small, fragile thing like dawn's first light. "Okay," she said, voice muffled against my shirt. "Okay." That afternoon, we sat together at Carla's kitchen table. I made us peanut butter and honey sandwiches, her new favorite, and poured lemonade into mismatched glasses. She sipped slowly, cheeks pinking. "Mom called while you were here," Carla said, voice gentle. "She wanted to talk to you." Isla stiffened. I glanced at her, then held up a hand. "It's okay. I'll talk to her." I excused Carla, and she slipped into her living room. I sank into the chair beside my daughter, who watched me with a guarded gaze. I dialed Corinne's number and held the phone to my ear. Her voice was cautious, measured. "Malik," she said. "Corinne, it's about Isla," I began. My words were deliberate. "She's not eating. Her grades are plummeting. She's scared because you threatened to send her away." Silence crackled on the line. "You can't do that to her," I said softly. "She's a kid. She needs both of her parents, even if you're hurting." Her voice trembled. I didn't mean to." "Then don't," I interrupted gently. "She needs you to be her mom, not someone who dangles threats. I'm taking her to therapy next week. You're welcome to join. But you can't use her as leverage." She sighed, a sound of regret. "You're right," she whispered. "I'm sorry." I drew a shaky breath. "Apologizing is a start. But she needs to know you won't abandon her again." "Yes," she said. "I won't." I hung up and looked at Isla. She held the phone to her ear, confusion and relief mingling in her eyes. I reached out and took her hand. "She said she won't send you away," I told her, "and she'll go to therapy with you." Isla exhaled, relief washing over her face. She set the phone down and leaned her head against my shoulder again. "Thank you, Dad," she murmured. "Thank you for coming." I pressed a kiss to her temple. "Always," I said. "You don't have to carry her choices. You're not the forgotten one." That evening, as we drove back to my apartment, I pointed out the changing skyline, the cranes lifting steel beams, the promise of new buildings rising from dusty lots. "Look at that," I said. "They're building something stronger than before." Isla smiled and snuggled into her car seat. "Just like us?" she asked. I glanced at her through the mirror. Her eyes sparkled with hope. "Exactly like us." And in that moment, I believed we could rebuild, room by room, heart by heart, forging a home from the fragments of our cracked fairy tale, one grounded in honesty, resilience, and our unbreakable bond. I unlocked the door to my new apartment and paused in the entryway, breathing in the scent of fresh paint mixed with lingering echoes of my past life. The layout was modest: 2 bedrooms, a combined living and dining area, and a small kitchen. But it felt expansive compared to the emptiness I carried in my chest. I set my toolbox by the closet and turned to find Isla standing in the center of the room, arms folded, eyes wide with cautious anticipation. "Welcome home," I said, voice soft. She offered a tentative smile in return, the first real one I'd seen in days. That smile felt like a promise. Here, we build again. We spent the afternoon hauling boxes up the narrow hallway. Her art supplies, my old Air Force duffel bag, clothes we'd both outgrown. Each box we unpacked felt like a small victory over the chaos Corinne and Lucas had unleashed. In the corner of what would be my room, I set up my drafting table, clearing the top of dust and debris. Across the hall, I knocked on her open door. "Want to pick a paint color?" I asked. She nodded, bouncing on her toes. Later, we stood before the paint swatches taped to the wall: teals, lavenders, pale grays. She hovered over a mid-tone blue with a hint of green. "Ocean foam," she breathed, "because it reminds me that even calm water moves." I smiled and jotted it down. By the sea, calm always shifts. That evening, after a dinner of chicken stir-fry, her request, I watched her sprawled on the floor of her room, sketching a mermaid sliding through waves. Her concentration was fierce, her pencil strokes confident. I felt my chest warm. This was reclaiming space, reclaiming self. As she drew, I assembled a small bookshelf in the corner, fitting each shelf until it stood straight and strong. I placed a row of her favorite novels on the top shelf and left room for new discoveries below. I imagined her friends visiting, flipping through volumes as they sank into the beanbag I planned to get. With each screw tightened, I felt the inertia of loneliness loosen its grip. Over the next week, I introduced structure. Family dinners at 6, no phones at the table. We made a game of naming our day's high and low points. I admitted my low had been losing the house I built. She confessed hers had been the day Mom didn't show up at school for Parent-Teacher Day. We laughed at how our lows offered insight into what we valued most: home, presence, support. Our highs included Isla's first A on a math test and my promotion to lead project manager on a new installation. We toasted with milkshakes and clinking spoons, savoring that small ritual of normalcy. One afternoon, Naya dropped by with her signature blunt grin and a giant pot of jollof rice. She strode in, surveyed the half-unpacked apartment, and declared, "Needs more cushions." She draped throw pillows across the couch and bounced on one, testing its fluff. "There," she said, satisfied. I introduced her to Isla, who beamed to meet the woman Dad didn't date but trusted. They traded mock insults, Isla calling her a grumpy fun sponge, and Naya threatening to pinch her ears until she behaved. I watched them laugh, side by side on the couch strewn with pillows, and felt the tension in my shoulders ease. Friendship, I realized, didn't aim to fill a void but offered a gentle nudge toward the person you could become. That weekend, as part of our rebuilding, I took Isla to a thrift store to find mismatched picture frames. We roamed aisles of chipped ceramics and faded vinyl records until she found a set of 8 wooden frames, one perfect for each family portrait we'd ever taken. She lined them on the hallway wall: the wedding, her birth announcement, the time we all wore matching costumes for Halloween. Lastly, she placed a blank frame at the end. "For the future," she said, slipping it into place. I hugged her from behind, feeling her small shoulders press into my chest. "For our new memories," I murmured. She nodded, then grabbed my hand and spun me around. One night, as the moonlight filtered through sheer curtains, I found myself in Isla's room teaching her how to solder a basic circuit board, a skill I'd honed over years of industrial installs. We built a small LED lamp together, wires twisting under our fingers as she held the components steady. When it lit, bathing the room in a soft glow, she grinned like she'd just unlocked a secret. I ruffled her hair, pride blooming in my chest. "See? You can create light, too." She looked at me, that familiar laughter dancing in her eyes. It struck me then that rebuilding wasn't only about walls and furniture, it was about fostering belief in ourselves. In the weeks that followed, our routines took on a comforting rhythm. Saturday mornings meant pancakes and cartoons. Sunday afternoons were for building Lego sets in the living room. I coached her through a school project on renewable energy, and she quizzed me on the difference between voltage and amperage as if testing her own progress. Sometimes we argued about bedtime or screen time, but we always ended in truce, usually over a shared dessert. Each argument reminded me that healing required friction. It proved we were invested in getting things right. One evening, I found an old photo album corroded by time on a shelf in my bedroom. The cover read Family, 2010 to 2018 in gold leaf. I called Isla in, and we sat on the bed, flipping through pages of yellowed photographs. Our wedding cake, her first smile, the Christmas tree she'd toppled over. Tears welled in my eyes as I watched her giggle at her toddler self. She looked up at me, expression solemn. "I'm happy we can make new pages," she said. I wiped my cheeks and nodded. "Me too," I said. She leaned against me and closed her eyes. "Thank you for giving me a home," she whispered. That night, after tucking her in and turning off the lamp we built together, I stood in the hallway and surveyed the apartment. The walls bore her drawings and our framed memories, the living room overflowed with pillows and books, and the air felt alive with possibility. In the silence, I realized we had done more than refill an empty space. We had stitched our lives back together, thread by patient thread. The fairy tale had cracked, but from its fragments we had constructed something more resilient, a home defined not by perfection, but by honesty, laughter, and the unbreakable bond between father and daughter. And as I turned out the hallway light and closed the door, I knew our story was far from over. It was simply entering its strongest chapter yet. The courtroom doors clanged shut behind Corinne, and for a moment I stood frozen outside, the late morning sunlight glinting off the marble floor as if mocking my resolve. Her heels tapped away, echoing down the hallway until only silence remained, a silence that tasted like ash in my mouth. I blinked against the brightness, every instinct screaming for me to chase after her, to beg for some shred of the woman I'd loved for over a decade to fight for us. But the truth settled in my chest like a stone. The chapter we'd once shared was over, and she had already turned the page. That afternoon, when I returned to Isla's side for our scheduled birthday lunch at the local diner, I caught sight of her reflection flickering in the glass door, blonde hair swept into a ponytail, her eyes wide and wary, her posture stiff with tension. She waved hesitantly, mumble greeting me through the window. My heart contracted. Birthdays used to be simple rituals of cake and presents. This time, even that felt tainted by the knowledge that her mother would arrive separately, if at all. I pushed open the door and felt the crash of warm air carrying the scent of frying onions and sugary syrup. We found our booth in the corner, and she studied the menu as though it held hidden traps. I waited until the waitress had taken our orders, pancakes for Isla, black coffee for me, before I nudged her hand gently. "Hey," I said. "I know today feels different, but I want you to know it's still your day, and I'm here for every bit of it." She looked up, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I miss normal, Dad," she said, voice cracking. "I miss when Mom and you would sing happy birthday together, off-key, but loud." Her shoulders shook, and I reached across the table, smoothing her hair behind her ear. "I miss it too," I admitted, "but maybe we can make a new normal, a better one." She blinked at me, and for a moment I saw her little girl again, hopeful, trusting, unfazed by life's complications. When the waitress returned with her pancakes, golden and piled high, Isla closed her eyes as the syrup pooled at the edges. She took a slow, deliberate bite, and I watched her face soften with delight. It was the first genuine smile I'd seen in days, and it gave me the courage to speak the words I'd practiced since the courtroom. "So, after lunch," I began, "I thought we could swing by the park and fly those kites you picked out last week. Then maybe record a video message for Grandma Roy. She misses you." Isla's lips curved upward, and she nodded vigorously. "Okay." We ate in companionable silence, then slipped out into the brisk autumn air, kites and spool in hand. The park was nearly deserted, save a few joggers and a pair of elderly women feeding pigeons. My fingers brushed Isla's as we untangled the kite string around her hand, and I felt the familiar surge of protectiveness. When she launched her kite into the wind, I cheered as it soared, lifting higher than the surrounding trees. She laughed, spinning in a circle as she ran, string trailing behind her like a tether to dreams. I set mine aloft too, and the two kites danced in parallel arcs against the steel-gray sky. But even as I reveled in the simplicity of that moment, I couldn't shake the ache of Curran's words from the final hearing. He changed. She told me Lucas hit her, a confession whispered in the parking lot after the judge dismissed our case. Her voice had trembled with betrayal and disbelief, shackled with too late regret. I'd watched her small frame shrink under the weight of her own choices, and part of me had wanted to reach out and pull her back from the ledge she'd stepped onto. Instead, I'd looked into her hollowed cheeks and flat expression and uttered the word that sealed our fate. No. Now the wind whipped at my collar, and I remembered how our marriage had started in a gust of youthful fervor. Late-night talks under open windows, road trips mapped in spray, paint on motel bathroom mirrors, laughter echoing down empty highways. Back then, we believed in the immortality of us. But over time, the painted motel walls faded, and our laughter became a soundtrack for everyday routines, PTA meetings, dinner preparations, bills paid on time. Somewhere along the way, the magic dissolved into the mundane, and we forgot how to surprise each other. When Corinne reawakened old sparks with Lucas, it was in the ruins of what we built, not in the ashes of devotion. I snapped back to the present as Isla called to me, pointing to her kite now caught in a high branch. I jogged over, heart pounding, and climbed the low trunk until I could reach the tangle of nylon. My fingers worked with familiar dexterity. Years of threading wires and guiding cables had taught me precision under pressure. The kite dropped into my hands, and I handed it back to her triumphantly. She threw her arms around me, her laughter a balm against my lingering sorrow. "Thank you," she whispered as we descended the tree. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and we walked toward the bench where we'd left our jackets. The afternoon sun dipped below the horizon, turning the sky a bruised purple. I held her close. "You're welcome," I said softly. "You always have me." As we packed up to leave, I surveyed the park one last time. The kites I held looked ordinary, now strands of wood and nylon battered by wind, but to me they were symbols of resilience, proof that even in a fractured sky, beauty could still rise. Driving home, I glanced at my daughter in the passenger seat, her eyes drooping with contentment. I realized that while fairy tales might crumble under the weight of reality, the people who survived them could forge something stronger, a bond not born of perfection, but of shared strength in the face of heartbreak. That night, after tucking Isla into bed, I lingered in her doorway and watched her drift to sleep. Her chest rose and fell in steady rhythms, and the soft glow of the lamp we'd built together cast gentle shadows on the wall. I thought of Corinne's fragile apology, how she'd claimed regret, missed me, wanted to try again, and I understood for the first time that forgiveness didn't mean reunion. Some doors, once welded shut by betrayal, must remain closed for healing to begin. I turned off the light and closed the door quietly, letting darkness settle in its place. In the emptiness of the hallway, I felt the weight of what we'd lost and the promise of what lay ahead. The ruins of our fairy tale were scattered in the dust, but from those fragments I would build a life grounded in honesty, respect, and the unwavering love I had for my daughter. And when morning came, I would rise not as a man broken by betrayal, but as a father determined to turn those ruins into the foundation of something real and enduring. Morning light filtered through the curtains as I padded into the kitchen, coffee in hand and quiet anticipation in my chest. The apartment felt different now, full rather than hollow, warm rather than cold. I found Isla at the tiny breakfast bar, spoon poised over a bowl of cereal, her hair mussed but her eyes bright. "Morning, champ," I said softly. She glanced up and smiled, and in that moment I realized peace wasn't a single moment but 1,000 small ones strung together. We talked over spoons of granola, her excitement about a history presentation, my plan to pick up her therapy report later today. Our conversation flowed easily, without the undercurrent of fear or resentment that had shadowed us for months. She laughed when I attempted a dad joke, an awkward pun about electricity, and I felt that old spark of joy I'd thought lost. After school, I headed to the project site for a routine safety inspection. My crew greeted me with a nod. No forced smiles, just genuine respect. Work had become my sanctuary again, a place where skill and dedication mattered more than personal drama. I walked among the towering steel beams, clipboard in hand, humming quietly. The hum of machinery was oddly comforting, a reminder that systems can be rebuilt stronger after failure. At noon, I stepped into my truck to take a video call with Corinne. She sounded better, humbled, reflective. She asked about Isla's progress in therapy, genuinely concerned. I updated her on improved grades and fewer anxiety episodes. For a moment, I saw the woman I'd once known, the partner who cared deeply about our daughter's well-being. Guilt flashed in her voice as she apologized again for the past. I thanked her and closed the call, aware that forgiveness didn't require forgetting. That evening, Roy and Carla stopped by with leftovers from their Sunday supper. Roy patted my shoulder. "You've done well, son," he said. Carla hugged me and admitted she'd been wrong to side too quickly with Corinne. The layers of old guilt peeled away in their eyes, replaced by appreciation and respect. We shared a simple meal at my reclaimed kitchen table, laughter rising between clinks of cutlery. Later, I tucked Isla into bed. She traced the lines of the lamp we built together. "I feel safe now," she whispered. I kissed her forehead. "Always." Back in the quiet living room, I sank into the couch and let the weight of the week settle. No moving trucks, no courtroom battles, just the steady pulse of a life I chose. I opened my laptop and wrote in my journal. Today, peace felt like breathing normally for the first time in months. I closed it, resting my hand on the cool cover. Outside, city lights glittered against the night sky, and I felt a calm I'd never known, proof that from the rubble of betrayal, one could cultivate hope. A new kind of peace, I realized, was not the absence of conflict but the presence of resilience, love, and quiet confidence in tomorrow. The morning air felt crisp as I stepped onto the porch with my coffee, Isla's laughter drifting from her bedroom window while she practiced scales on her keyboard. 6 months ago, this sounded impossible. A fractured family, legal battles, nights spent in bureaucratic limbo. Now, the rhythm of our life felt natural, school projects, weekend jollof dinners with Naya, bedtime chats that stretched into shared stories. I inhaled deeply, grateful for the normalcy we'd rebuilt. Later that day, as I reviewed wiring diagrams at the site office, my phone buzzed with a police notification. Lucas Cross had been arrested for violating a restraining order. My chest tightened. A flash of vindication mingled with pity. He'd shown up at Corinne's cousin's house, demanding she change her mind. When she called the cops, Lucas refused to leave. His arrest report listed charges of harassment and trespassing. I listened to the details, setting my jaw. Justice, I reminded myself, wasn't revenge, it was boundary enforcement. When I got home, I found Corinne on the doorstep, eyes red but composed. She held a crumpled envelope. "They found Lucas's phone in the bushes by my car," she said. "He's in custody." I could see the fear in her voice, remnants of the woman who first fell for his reckless charm, now shattered by it. She handed me a note from the detective. "He tried calling you too." My finger traced the printed words. Lucas's fantasy of reclaiming her had backfired into legal consequences. Inside, I placed the envelope on the kitchen counter. Isla appeared behind me and peered at the police letter. I crouched beside her and squeezed her hand. "He can't hurt us again," I promised. She nodded, relief softening her face. That evening, Corinne called to confirm she'd signed the final papers: resignation from the joint business, formal withdrawal of any claim to our past. Her voice was quiet. "Thank you for keeping Isla safe," she said. I replied, "We both love her. Let's keep it that way." Weeks later, at Isla's school recital, I spotted her dancing center stage, confidence shining brighter than any spotlight. Naya waved from the front row, and I felt warmth flood my chest. The years ahead would hold twists I couldn't predict, but we'd weather storms before. As the final note rang out, I stood with applause, Isla's smile matching the crescendo. In that moment I understood. I hadn't needed revenge or grand gestures. What they never saw coming was our quiet triumph. Two hearts healed and forging forward, stronger together than apart.